discussion. Thank you. Let me start again. Good morning, and thank everyone so much for joining us for this very important community discussion about who will be Kansas City's next chief of police. And I'm really delighted to be joined by a stellar cast of panelists that I will introduce here momentarily. But the purpose of this webinar, this community forum, is for us to talk about the common best practices in US cities that are utilizing a community-centric approach in their search for a new police chief. We also are going to talk about the skills, attributes, talents, and temperament that we want to see in our next chief. And to gather community input, we will be providing a survey at the end of this webinar, and we hope that you will just take 5 minutes. It's a short survey. We'll put the link in the chat and complete that and return that to us, because the plan is for us to host a series of community input sessions as we go forward and try our best to encourage the Board of Police Commissioners to listen to and amplify the voices of our community as they advance the search for the new police chief. And we believe this is a critical time, and we hope that all of those of you who are watching today and will get involved and show up and speak up and share your input today. So let me welcome our panelists. We have Mr. Damon Daniel, who is the president and CEO of Ad Hoc Group Against Crime. Good morning, Damon. We have Ms. Melissa Johnson, who is Deputy Chief of Staff for Mayor Quentin Lucas. Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning.
We have Laura McDonald, Executive Director of Moore Square. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning.
And we have our fabulous 3rd District City Councilwoman, Melissa Robinson. Good morning, Councilwoman Robinson.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Okay, so, I'm gonna start by sharing my screen here in just a moment to lift up some of the best practices that we've surfaced as we prepared for this session. And I wanna thank Melissa Johnson for her input in sharing the information that she's gathered. I also want to give a shout out to the National Urban League team, our social justice department, for sharing, helping me by providing the input relative to best practices. So I'm going to share my screen, and then we're going to talk through these best practices so you guys can provide your input as well. And can you all see that slideshow? There we go. All right, how am I looking here? Looking good? Okay, great. All right, so what some of the common practices that we found in our outreach to find community-centric models are things like certainly contracting with the search firm, involving council members and residents and the hiring process, hosting community meetings, and having a search committee that will hear from that's headed by council members and prominent members of the community and nonprofits, civil rights community leaders, and members of law enforcement, surveying residents about what qualities and priorities they would like to see in a chief, allowing the community to participate in the interview process, and the administration hosting listening sessions with various groups. Now, this says administration, so I think it's important right here to just insert this very important fact. As we looked across the country at all of these best practices, there was one thing that separates Kansas City from all of the other cities, and that is we do not have local control of our police department, and therefore these other cities have their mayor, their city council, their city manager playing the leading role in the search, selection and hiring of the new police chief. We don't have that here. What we have is a board of police commissioners that can choose to gather input from the community at large, or they can choose not to do so. So here we talk about administration hosting listening sessions with various groups, and we'll see as we go forward and talk about these models, to what extent some of those cities really dug into processes that would allow the community voices to be amplified. So let me stop right here and just ask the panelists to weigh in on this. So what are your thoughts about these common practices, and how do you think of these common practices, which do you think are really critical for us to employ here in Kansas City? Do I need to call on each of you, or just jump in there?
Certainly. Thank you so much, Ms. Grant, again, for your leadership in making sure that we have this important dialogue with the community. Yes, we need to make sure that residents are involved deeply in this process and helping to build the profile so that we know whom we need to be looking for and what types of talents, strengths, abilities that they have, that they'll be coming to the table with. And I am deeply committed and want to make sure that people participating in the interview process, as well as at the decision-making table, but it will require us to join in with the Police Accountability Task Force to build power, because that's something that is desperately needed. If our voice is going to be heard in this process, we're going to have to build the power to do that. And I'm hopeful that everyone on this call will join you all in that fight.
Thank you.
Yes, Gwen, I would like to speak to contracting with a search firm. In my role with the mayor's office, I have the opportunity to work with a number of our KCPD officers. And so I do personally know that we do have good over at our department, but I do think we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we did not hire a search firm, a national search firm, to cast the widest net for the best candidate as possible. Also, there are a number of executive search firms that are solely dedicated to the function of finding chiefs of police, which indicates to me that A, we know that there's a clear market for it, and B, we know how important selecting the right person for this job is. So I believe that we should definitely contract with the search firm. It has been successful in a number of other cities, and I definitely think that's the route that we should go.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Laura, Damon, anything else? You want to add anything?
I just, at More Squared, we think community engagement is definitely the most important aspect of this. And so I would compel everyone, go to the next Board of Police Commission meeting at 9:30 on, I believe it's on 2/22/22 this year at 9:30 in the morning at police headquarters. Go down there and start talking about this, because you're right, Ms. Grant, they don't have to listen to us, but we shall compel them to listen to this, to us through community engagement.
Yes, and we will be sharing this information. So when you respond to the survey or put your questions in the chat, we're going to record all this information. We're going to compile your input and share it with the Board of Police Commissioners, and then it's left up to them what they do with the information. Damon, anything to add?
Well, one, thank you. I echo my gratitude for the opportunity to be on this panel. I think this is a really important discussion to be having at this juncture, considering the fact that the Board of Police Commissioners has issued an RFP for a search firm. So us having this discussion and talking about the common practices and how the community should be engaged is extremely important at this point in the process. And so I don't want to repeat anything that's been said, but I just think that this is a very, very important piece to this process, and making sure that this search firm is, particularly even the Board of Police Commissioners, hear what we're discussing in terms of the process, to make sure that whatever firm is hired, that they do follow a process that is truly engaging the community.
Thank you. So I'll go on to the next slide here, and we'll begin to take a look at a few of the chief selection processes, and in this thing, I think we'll find some good, some bad, and some ugly as we go through this. And it turns out Grand Rapids, we're starting with, I guess, what was ugly, because in Grand Rapids, they did the standard job solicitation. The city manager played the leading role in screening down the pool of applicants. And they had a public a community forum. However, the NAACP was not pleased with the process and really felt that the civil rights organizations and others should have played a greater role in the screening and selection process. And I think that's really critical when we have this conversation. At what point should the Board of Police Commissioners engage community? And I certainly believe, and I'd like to hear what you guys think about, should they be talking to community right now? Should they be incorporating the community input into the actual design of the job solicitation? What are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely believe that now is the time. I'm hoping that some of our commissioners are on today. My office did invite them to participate in this process, to listen, because we have to start in the beginning and not be inserted at the end. Far too often, we get involved too late. And so when we're talking about the RFP, we need to be looking at that RFP. We need to be looking to make sure that even those points in the solicitation are in alignment with what we want to see in the end. So we do have to begin with the end in mind, taking a point from Stephen Covey there. And some of the conversations that we've gotten is that, we need to develop our process first. And then I assure you that there's going to be transparency. I assure you that there's going to be community involvement. Well, that involvement starts now. It doesn't start in March after things have already been settled and done. And so, yes, they need to be engaged with the community at this juncture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's community involvement, and there's real authentic community involvement, which is not getting down to 3 finalists and then having some community dog and pony shows, and when you've already decided who you're gonna hire. That's not what we're talking about here. So let's go on. Any other thoughts, anybody? I don't want to shut down.
Yeah, I echo what Councilwoman Robinson said. I think it's extremely important for the commissioners to get out into the community and hold various forums. And I would encourage them, and I do hope that some of them or all of them that are on this that are participating in this meeting. But it would be great for them to really go through all 6 districts and work with local city council in doing so, and really just listening to the community and surveying the community in terms of what does the community want to see in the next police chief. I think that would show, even though we don't have local control, that would at least show that those commissioners are really committed to hearing from the community and making sure that their voices are represented in this process. So I think it's extremely important for them to get involved right now.
Yeah, and we'll see a little later on one of the slides, what is considered one of the gold standard processes that was employed by Phoenix, Arizona. They actually did like 13 community meetings just to get input on the talents and skills and experiences of the chief. So they were very, very thorough. So let's take a look at another one. Chattanooga, Tennessee. Here they had the mayor and city council. They used a search firm. Melissa spoke earlier about there are some search firms that focus entirely on searching for police chiefs. And this one, the police executive research firm, PERF, is who they engaged. They selected 4 candidates with a track record of innovation and community engagement, which is another reason it's so important. We want to see a chief that is certainly more progressive, future focused, has a track record of community engagement. And so if we put all that in the search, on the front end, then that's the charge for the search firm, is to go out and find people who have demonstrated experience and outcomes in those areas. And so this just gives you a view of who they had involved. You see here they had civil rights, faith-based, education, folks, entrepreneurs involved. And at the end of the day, the mayor selects the candidate. Because the mayor, this is a city where they have control, and it's probably a strong mayor form of government. here, Burlington, Vermont. And just jump in, guys, if there's, and ladies, if there's something that pops out here and that you want to add.
Let me just do that real quick then. On that previous slide, it showed the various sort of civil rights groups and things like that, and community voices. I think that if we want to avoid, I think when you have the kind of, few years that we've had as it relates to community groups and civil rights groups coming out and speaking against the chief and asking for resignations and all of that kind of stuff, I think it's important to meet those groups head on and engage them early in the process and make them and invite them to be a part of the process and at the table. And so I think that, I like this list of groups and community groups, but it's important for us to, we're at a place where the city, this country is so divided. And so one of the ways to deal with that or address that is to bring those different voices, those varying views and opinions to the table, and go through a collective process. And so this is the time to do that.
Absolutely. Great point.
And to add on to Damon's comments, I do want to talk a little bit more about the types of panels that different cities use when they're doing these type of panel interviews. The thought behind the panel interview is that you assemble a panel from a certain sector of the community. And I am so glad that civil rights organizations are reflected on this list, but I have also seen other cities create panel interviews of a wider array of doctrines. For example, they would have a public health panel because we now know that gun violence and violent crime is a public health issue. Other cities have had members from the business community, prominent members from the business community, because we know the higher our city's crime is, the less attractive it is to other businesses that may be looking to relocate or implement plants in other sectors of America. So I do think that we should very well focus on our civil rights organizations and our activists, but we need to assemble panels that reflect crime being a citywide problem, not just a problem of the urban core.
Absolutely. Amen. Very well stated, Ms. Melissa, very well stated. And, to add to that list, you would have educators, you would certainly have mental health specialists, all of these things, economic development. We would look, if you gather really broad-based input. So excellent point. Thank you for that. And so back to Burlington, Vermont. Here, they actually hired their person in January, but they had a 2-year process. And even after that 2-year process, you have segments of the community are not comfortable with the choice that was made. So we do know that this is hiring a police chief can be very contentious. There are lots of perspectives that come into play. But here, the progressives were concerned that the person selected is resistant to the necessary transformative change. And that's really one of those areas I know we will be very much concerned about here. And if we reflect on this, the process that the Board of Police Commissioners employed when they hired Rick Smith, it was certainly not one where there was any community engagement on the front end. And when community people wanted to push back on Rick Smith before he was hired, it's not like we all came out of the woodworks after the fact to complain about Rick Smith. We had concerns about Rick Smith before he was appointed. And we tried to express those concerns, but the Board of Police Commissioners turned a deaf ear to that community input. So we hope that they will do better going forward. So let's go to the next one here. Phoenix, Arizona. This is the one that I talked about being like the gold standard. They had a year-long process. They held 13 community meetings. And in fact, other cities and countries have actually taken a look at how Phoenix, Arizona conducted their search because of this really, really robust community engagement process that they employed. They created their job solicitation based on community input. And then they did the national search. They started with a pool of 65, narrowed it down to 10. And then they used these community panels. And I would venture a guess, Melissa, that they had a variety of different groups involved in those community panels, which made this even more, powerful. And once they nailed it down to the 3 finalists, the public was further engaged. They were able to submit questions. They had a televised community forum. People were able to submit questions for candidates online before the forum, and submit questions at the forum in person. And so this was really, really great. I was very impressed with this, and it would be great if we could do something like this in Kansas City. And the questions span topics like body cameras, training, philosophy of modern policing, and Black Lives Matter. So they went all in, it looks to me like, okay. And so then they hired their chief, the former chief of California Police Department recently. So any comments about this one? Anybody want to add anything here?
Yes, Gwen, I actually went back and watched the final community forum that vetted the 3 finalists, and you are correct. They did not mince words. The community and the city leadership that posed the questions to the finalists. It is a tough job. It is. And especially in a city that has dealt with violent crime for so long, it is going to be a tough job here in Kansas City. But we need to be able to vet the qualifications on the front end. And so I do think that policing in the modern age is a very, very nuanced and contextual field. And so we need to be able to ask the necessary questions from the community, not just city leadership, to make sure we are getting the right person for the job.
Right. And it's so important for community to show up, right? We talk about having the civil rights leaders and, the Police Accountability Task Force, our elected officials, but we are here to serve our community, our constituents. And if you don't show up and tell us, then, it weakens our perspective. And we just feel we place a very high value on what the people in the community who are having to live with violent crime in their neighborhoods, and the lack of support or lack of trust in policing. We need to hear your voice. We need to hear what your experiences are, and then what type of relationship do you want to have with the police department, with the police chief. And in a minute, I think we should also talk about what role the bargaining unit, the Fraternal Order of Police, should or should not play in the selection of the new chief. So any other thoughts here before we go to the next slide?
Yes, Ms. Grant, I would like to note a couple of things on this slide. One is the diversity and inclusion. A lot of times we talk about it, but this is an example of the more voices you have, the better outcome that you're going to receive. And so that is really critical. This posture of being insular serves no one, and that's the trajectory that we're on. But if we are going to include those voices, it's going to take us and the people that are on this call to build that power and to build their voice. It's not enough. While we are happy that everybody is on this call on a Saturday morning, it's not enough. You have to show up, as Laura McDonald said, at the Board of Police Commissioners. We have to build an agenda, and we have to be demanding about what the public wants. The Kansas City Police Department is a public agency, and it requires the public to not only remind and set those expectations, but to apply pressure until we get what it is that we want. And we can't just always fall back on, oh, we don't have local control, so we're in this oppressive position. Yes, that's unfortunate, but we do have our voice and we do have power, and we need to build that power and utilize it to get the outcomes that we want and we seek.
Yep. Anyone else? Okay. All right, so let's shift here and have some dialogue about what types of experiences, talents, and temperament we want to see in the next chief of police. And so here are just some of the traits and characteristics that we were able to research, just looking at what other cities and what other as they gathered input from the community, these are some of the things that people said they wanted to see in their next chief. And we just provide these as a starting point, and there are many, many more. In fact, as I was doing some research, I found information from Fresno, California, and they had so many that they put a community survey out. I don't even know how the folks weeded through it because it had several pages listing several different characteristics, but they narrowed it down to get to the top 20. And so I think, we should certainly do something along these lines as we gather input from the community, and you'll see these characteristics on the survey that we'll distribute here towards the end of this webinar. So take a look at these. Which of these here track record of collaborating with community members on decision making, implementation and evaluation of recruitment and hiring, training, and all departmental policies, practices, and priorities. That's a lot, but I think it's a lot of important stuff in there. So just take a look at these and talk about which ones you think should be prioritized. Are all of these necessary? What are some of the most important?
I'll start with accessible to the community, because I think that is inherent in a number of qualifications I see on my screen right now. Kansas City participates in the Public Safety Partnership, which is a program run by the Department of Justice that sends different law enforcement officials to high violent, high crime cities to create a strategic plan for that city on how to reduce crime. Kansas City participated in that program, and the Department of Justice in our own strategic plan told us that we have a pervasive problem of a lack of trust between the department and the community it serves. That is the Department of Justice saying that, not Melissa Johnson. So because of that, we need a chief of police that is very visible and accessible to the community his or her department serves. When you are familiar with an individual and their premise and their plan for the city, it's much easier to trust them because you have a sense of knowledge about their track record, their expertise, their vision, and their plans for the city. So I would definitely want to start with accessible to the community and a good listener.
Great.
I would just add, I think all of these are important. Some of the things that stick out to me in my seat, a lot of times we have conversations about the prosecutor and the relationship with our prosecutor's office. And so that's going to be critically important that the chief have a good working relationships with the prosecutor's office, as well as open to police reforms, national police reforms, best practices, progressive means progressing us forward. Those are two that are critically important if I would to build on what Ms. Johnson stated.
And as those of you who are watching, please put your preferences in the chat as well. And when we get to that, we'll certainly try to read and share most of that information.
Like Melissa, I too agree that all of these are important. I think what I would add to this list would be someone who has experience managing an organization. We're talking about a law enforcement force of nearly 2,000 people, and I believe it's close to 1,800 sworn officers. And so when I think about 911 responses, when I think about the various units that are there, whether it's the homicide unit, missing persons, et cetera, I think it's extremely important to have somebody who has managerial experience and knows how to manage that. And then in a time where, the technology and the availability of guns and what people can purchase online to make their guns more automatic. I mean, there's a whole list of complex issues that this individual has to deal with. And so from a community perspective, I think all of these are very important talents and experience and all of that stuff. But I think also making sure that person can manage that force as well, and making sure that we can really tackle some of the specific things that Kansas City is dealing with, whether it's the guns across state lines, the influx of drugs. I mean, there's so many complex issues that our city faces. And so someone that has that experience addressing those issues is going to be extremely important too.
Okay. Made a note of that. What about character and integrity? I think that's probably missing here, isn't it?
I think one of the things that we're most concerned about is a chief who understands it is his or her job to serve the community. And I think when we reflect on the chief that we've had of recent, he sees it as his job to serve the police department. So that's not spelled out on here, but we really need somebody who understands that they are in a leadership position for Kansas City, not for Kansas City's police officers alone.
Okay. So to that point, Laura, it is there. I think primary focus is to protect and serve the public. That may be what was intended there with that. However, to your point further, Chief Smith came up out of the ranks of the Fraternal Order of Police. He was the least experienced of the three candidates that they, the pool that he was in. He was a major. I believe the other two finalists were deputy chiefs and had leadership roles at a higher level than he. But he came through the ranks of the FOP. Do you think we should go back to that pool in this search? What are your thoughts about, should we really press for a national candidate, or should we also be open to another internal candidate? What are your thoughts about that?
One of the things that we've been observing is systemic racism throughout this department. And so we wonder at More Squared and other organizations, we've speculated that maybe some of the best officers who are women, people of color, aren't getting promoted and won't be eligible for candidacy because of the systemic racism in the department. And so I think we do need to look far and wide if we're going to weed that out. It may come up through the department, but it didn't this time. So I think we need to do a nationwide search and really be serious about the type of person who will, as many have said in the chat box, really hold police officers accountable at a high level. And an outsider may be more inclined to do that than somebody who has been with officers and work amongst them. So I think we should be very open to an outsider at this point.
Well, and one of the things that, currently is impacting the 3rd district, there's several of these on here that impact the 3rd district, but is leaving the rank and file bare. We have to make sure that there are officers that can respond to issues throughout the city. There are parts in the Northland that don't have coverage. And so there is a balance, but we have to make sure that efficiency and making sure that the public comes first. And it's not about, us promoting, our friends and having this excessive administrative structure and not having enough officers to respond to calls. And so a national search is extremely important, but building the profile to say, this is what we want, this is what we're looking for, and whomever can best demonstrate that they're able to deliver on those things, that's who we should select. And if we just do it insular, that's not going to serve Kansas City. It has to be a national search, and it has to be a firm that has a deep relationship with officers across the country and people that are in leadership across the country, and not just within our region.
Right. So this current department is plagued with a culture that certainly begs for change and transformation relative to excessive force policies, the manner in which Chief Smith has led this department, as you stated earlier, with a culture of protecting and serving officers rather than the public. Several officers indicted, stories of racism and discrimination blatantly displayed inside the department. So it would require a leader who has the capacity to disrupt, dismantle a system that has been in place and that has been allowed to fester over since 2017 when Smith was appointed. That takes a special kind of leader. And the concern I have, while I think certainly internal candidates should be given serious consideration along with national candidates, but it begs the question: can someone coming out of the ranks truly dismantle and transform and redirect the operating practices and the culture within KCPD? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I definitely think it's possible. Just how I know people of color, especially Black people, like to say that we are not a monolith, neither are police officers. And so we have to have the open-mindedness and awareness to understand that every officer in KCPD does not reflect the same train of thought as its leadership. And we need to stay optimistic, because I definitely do think there are great leaders and good candidates within KCPD's ranks right now.
Yeah, I hope you're correct on that, Melissa. I mean, I certainly agree with what you're saying. However, as we look at just data across the country, now coming to the whole point about the Fraternal Order of Police and their ability to impede transformation and reform in law enforcement. They have so much power, so much influence, and certainly in a city such as ours where we don't have local control, I think that makes them all the more powerful. They have such a strong lobby at the state level, a lot of influence with the Board of Police Commissioners. So we have to be really, really vigilant in being very vocal about, the next leader, and really how important a leader that has some history of actually redefining systems and policies and actually cultural shifts inside organizations. I think that's very important. So any other thoughts on here? This is the last slide, so I just wanted to leave that there for a while. So that our folks could see that and think about those characteristics as you add information into the chat. And I would ask my team to go ahead and distribute, even though we're early, go ahead and distribute, put the link in the chats for the survey so that people can begin to fill that out and return that, so we have plenty of time. Please do it while we're still in the session. That way we know we get those back, because I know once we get off this, the sun is shining, it's a Saturday morning, you guys are going to hit the streets and forget about this. So do it now, please. So let's continue. There are lots of questions, I think, in the chat. And while I've got to go back now and try to get to the beginning here so that we can now begin to respond to questions and input from our guests. So we'll start here. After 9 years of local control of the St. Louis Police Department, this year they are asking the state to take back control. Are you aware of the reasons why? Oh, Laura, it's a perfect question for you to respond to, and then share a little more information about our local control work here.
It's actually, there was an outstate representative who filed a bill for local control of St. Louis to be restored, but he does not live in St. Louis. And Rasheen Aldridge, Representative Aldridge, actually filed a bill trying to control that man's city's police department. It's a small, I can't remember what town, of like 10,000 people, right? Just to make the point of, local control did not work in St. Louis, and I think he called it something like a miserable failure in Kansas City, or the lack of local control. State control didn't work in St. Louis or Kansas City, is what Rep. Aldridge said, who many of us know came up through Ferguson and got himself elected after Ferguson, and he was a part of the uprising there. So it's not true that the people of St. Louis universally want to restore state control. What they have is a flawed model, and a model that we should not pursue here, where there's a kind of an intermediary between the police chief and the mayor. And having said all of that, we believe Mayor Jones has replaced the person who was problematic with somebody who's doing a much better job. And we think they are turning things around even there with Mayor Tashura Jones' new person. So it's a complicated issue. We would think after 50 years of working on regaining control in St. Louis that by and large, the people who did that don't want to restore it to the state. And that we're seeing signs of that. But there have been some outstate people who've wanted that, right? Some people who think that urban police departments are something they should control, even though they're in, Bowling Green, Missouri, or wherever. It's ludicrous.
Yeah. I mean, so St. Louis may have some challenges. They need to go back and revisit the model of local control. But I certainly don't think the problems with the model certainly outweigh the importance of local communities having control over their local police departments. And we're the only one in the state who does not have that. I mean, so it just, there's not a strong case that I can find for not having local control. And we're one of the only cities in the entire country that does not have that. And we pay for it, but we have no say in policies, and it's just nonsense.
Ms. Grant, one of the folks in the chat wanted to talk about the pathway to local control. Is that something that you all could speak to?
Sure. I'm going to ask, again, I'm going to defer to my colleague, Laura, to kind of talk about that, because Moore Square has been taking the lead with us on local control efforts. And we, along with the Police Accountability Task Force, currently have a working group. We've got a lot of things coming forward here in the next several days. And so, Laura, why don't you just kind of highlight the process? Are you speaking to what people what does it require to get it? Okay. So Laura, do that.
So it actually requires us to have a state law, a state statute change in Missouri, as well as a local city ordinance passed. Those two measures both have to happen. The state statute could happen through placing it on the ballot. The legislature could do that. We, the people, could mobilize across the state and get it put on the ballot, like we did Medicaid expansion and other measures, Clean Missouri. Or the state legislature could pass it themselves, pass a state law themselves. So those are the three pathways for state passage. And then a local city ordinance must pass as well. And you'll be hearing a lot more about the community engagement work that we're going to be doing to educate voters about local control. So it's a really good question. And then there's actually another possibility, which Gwen Grant, I know, has been a part of, and that's a legal strategy that perhaps the courts would rule that this is, as we keep saying, not a democracy and undemocratic and not representative. And so there is this other court strategy that I would encourage you all to pay attention to and watch.
Okay, thank you. Laura, do you want to also talk about 22222? This is a good time.
Sure, I would love to give a plug. So on 22222 Tuesday, 22222 at 6 p.m. we have our big annual public meeting. Think of it as like a spirited pep rally for racial justice. Councilwoman Robinson always comes out and makes a great commitment to our group. She did something around local control the last time she was there, got a study commissioned at City Hall that's Melissa Johnson actually was a part of. So we've done some great things like that. This year, we're launching our big voter engagement campaign, and it's called 2022, a campaign for local control. And we would love for all of you to be a part of that. So it's 6 p.m. on Zoom or at St. James. You can come to St. James United Methodist. Everybody knows where that is, at 51st and Wayne, right? St. James United Methodist Church, or on Zoom. And the way you register for that and get your Zoom link is just more2.org. You can do that right now. I think it's on our homepage. We'd love for everybody. This isn't just a More Squared campaign. It's a campaign for local control. It's for all of us.
Okay, so I'm gonna get back here to the questions. The next one after that is do you think we could have some qualified people right here in KC that could qualify instead of bringing someone who doesn't know anything about KC? So I think we pretty much addressed the fact that we believe both people external to Kansas City as well as people within the department should all be considered for the position. And sometimes having people who are not entrenched in local politics or tied to the process can do a better job of disrupting and making the change that's necessary. So it's really about finding the best person with the best leadership skills and experiences, be they internal or from outside. They must begin talking and gathering input from the community immediately. I think that was echoing Damon's responses, as well as I think there's a lot of support for that. Let's see, current Kansas City police officers include many qualified people. So we discussed that. There's someone saying that we need somebody untainted by Brad Lemon. Selecting the right search firm is almost as important to selecting a police chief. They need to be aware of and look for candidates the community wants and needs. And then if we are hiring a person for a task, it would be good to know what the current policing strategy is, what is KCPD's strategic plan, so that we can consider our support for that, and then search for a person who can lead that change. For example, is there a crime reduction plan in place? I see both Melissa and Laura nodding. Do you have any? Melissa, perhaps, is there, the Board of Police Commissioners, is there a plan? I'm not aware of a plan that speaks to strategic change or for the police department that would define the role of the police chief. Does that exist in Kansas City?
Well, I can say that through the PSP strategic plan, we do have a coordinated plan that gives us some action items and key ways forward on how to make our city less violent. But again, that was a product of the PSP process, not necessarily something that came from KCPD internally. So I did just want to add that caveat. There is a plan that came from the Department of Justice that has a lot of key action items, and that in conjunction with the KC Blueprint that Melissa Robinson was very instrumental in drafting does give us a way forward, but it is not my understanding that they came internally from KCPD.
Well, yes. And so if there is a plan, that has to be adopted by the Board of Police Commissioners. And so I know one of our commissioners is online, Mayor Quentin Lucas. Thank you for being here and listening. And hopefully others are on as well. But that has to come forward with the motion to accept those plans, and it has to be a part of the body of work of the Board of Police Commissioners. In meeting with the Board of Police Commissioners, they asked the council members to come and have a joint meeting with them. One of the questions is, what is it that you want to see as relates to improvement for policing in Kansas City? And so that has to be clearly articulated, and it's not at this point. And until we can get there, the community has to, again, be a part of designing that process of what we want to see and apply the appropriate pressure to get that done.
So Mayor Lucas is in the audience and perhaps can either drop some comments in the chat relative to yeah, I know I'm putting you on the spot, Mayor, but that's what mayors have to do, is respond to being put on the spot. So if you want to weigh in on here, just kind of shed some light on your thinking as a commissioner. Do you think there's any has there been any discussion amongst commissioners relative to the process for a community-centric approach to the search and selection of the new chief? You think, please
Well, we will have to promote him to be a
Oh, yeah,
panelist.
you know what?
But,
Hey,
and
we
Mr.
could,
Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on. I was thanking
oh,
you.
I think he's.
That was gonna be my question. I can promote
Yes,
him to a panelist.
Please
Okay.
promote our illustrious
Okay.
mayor to the panel. There we go. Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning. Good morning. How you doing?
We're
Sorry.
doing great this morning. Thank you for joining us. And I just want to say that Melissa Johnson has represented your office extremely well this morning. But now that you're here, let's hear from you relative to the actual search process. Tell us what's going on with you commissioners over there, what y'all gonna do about this search.
Right. So I heard a few different things from all of y'all about which I agree almost 100%. I think that it is important for us to have more public engagement in terms of what are the actual items and tools that we are looking for early. I think that means public meetings throughout the city. We cannot just be in the Board of Police Commissioners meeting room. I previously served on city council, so I actually like that idea of going to different districts, but also making sure I respect the voters of Kansas City. So making sure you engage with our elected officials that are on city council now, listening to ideas because they get, and I got this as a councilman, a lot of either complaints or congratulations or whatever. And so that's going to be point one. In terms of a point that I heard before, and I appreciate it, I think Ms. McDonald made it, on the inside versus outside idea. There probably are some talented folks who have been within the department for a while, who may not have seen themselves rise in the same way if they got on the wrong side of the regime. And I say that with respect to everybody and anybody there. So I want to make sure we have a chance to hear from them and their voices. I actually think I'd also appreciate hearing from, in kind of a full setting, our Black officers, our female officers, Latino officers, and others. And that's where I think will be important for us going forward. And then I think a final item, and then I'll stand for more questions because I know I'm sure you got them. You always do for me, Ms. Grant, is to make sure that you have somebody who has a track record for calling out that which is wrong. It was said before, and it is absolutely right. The chief of police does not work for the Kansas City Police Department. The chief of police, she or he, and she, I'll put it in there, she or he works for the people of Kansas City, all the people of Kansas City. Frankly, sometimes I think we need to remind the Board of Police Commissioners as well that that's our role. And so that's where I would start. And then that's where I want us to kind of go going forward.
Okay, so and thank you so much. So
Back, let me move. Okay.
Okay.
There we go. Sorry.
How much influence will you be able to have on your fellow commissioners relative to establishing a community-centric search process? And I think I can speak for the panelists and hopefully for many of those watching. We don't want to rush this process to hire the new chief. You know, the Phoenix they did over a year. One of them had, took a couple of years. However long it takes to get the kind of police chief that will be community focused and progressive in terms of policies and practices, that's what I believe most Kansas Cityans want. Do you think, is there the will within the Board of Police Commissioners to be very pragmatic, planful, engaging of community in the process going forward?
So I'll try to be as persuasive as I possibly can. I mean, I'll give an example, and I'm proud of it at this point. This year, after looking at years of budget moves that actually reduced salaries and paid for lawsuits, something that I was proud of was that we got the board to agree, I think wisely, to not take funds that go to salaries and other items and put them in other ways like legal settlements. That was not easy, by the way. That just took a lot of talking. I think Councilwoman Robinson mentioned this before. You still got a voice, right? No matter what group you're on, you got a voice. And so I have lost my share of votes on the Board of Police Commissioners, don't get me wrong, but I'm still there. And I'm the one that usually is able to get some sort of either press attention, conversation, and all of that. And I will continue to use that. And I will continue to use that to speak to board members. And I think that if you can make a logical point, you can prevail sometimes. And for me, the very simple logical point is, what is the problem with making sure that we talk to more people who are representative of our communities? What is the problem with making sure that you hear more people out, or you have, discussions that are outside of the board meeting room? That is what I am interested in. And the other amazing thing is, for those of y'all, there are some of our police officers who get out in the community or try and really do. And so unleashing them to be able to, I think, represent that more is what I'll do. But Ms. Grant, this is a promise I'll make you. You can get on me if I don't make it later.
And you know I will, right?
I know you will. No, I plan to push us to have both as much community involvement as possible. But of course, I'm going to try to be as persuasive as I possibly can. I will make this point, though. Another conversation that we need to have that is actually actively ongoing right now: who will be the interim chief? Right? Who is actually our interim chief, particularly for however long that process is, because there are issues and things and all this sort of stuff happening now that we need to make sure we're a part of too.
Excellent point. And let's have some dialogue about that right now, because that is a concern. And, I hope at what point, well, can you give us some some update on just exactly when Rick Smith will be gone? Is that sooner, hopefully sooner rather than later, but can you provide what's the timetable?
Yeah, I mean, on that process, so this is the harder part for all of it. If you asked about the interim, I had a little trouble hearing, but that's all good. On that, I think that will be more of I'm seeing some of the comments, that will be a true board discussion. What I'm trying to do right now is make sure that is a board discussion where we are still thinking about what is necessary for the future of our department, where you're not just necessarily saying, let's keep everything the same. And I think when you talk about battles, that's the next meeting and the meeting after real battle. And so this is where I welcome, if y'all know some of those folks in the department right now who have been strong voices, who are the types of folks that that you can talk to, that's the voice to start getting out there. And, I also say this, I believe every board member's email address should be public, or at least they have a public email address. Make sure your voices are heard on that, not just the bopc@kcpd.org address, that's fine. But, if the whole theory of this system is that everybody comes from the community and it's not just the governor's choice, then they're supposed to be a part of it all too.
Yeah, and we have to be more involved in backing the mayor's play and backing the mayor as he seeks to make change at the Board of Police Commissioners. So to the extent that we are aware of, what you're working on and how we can be engaged, we have your back, because we know that you come from the 3rd District, in that, it's about right versus wrong. It's not about, serving anybody's particular interest. And so this group can be more engaged in that.
So, yeah, and I believe there are some talented people who could step up and serve as interim. I saw someone put in the chat that they hope it's a Black person, and then someone said they don't want another. Got into the race issue here, wanting to see some leadership come up out of the ranks from the African American community. Without having any concrete timing as to when Rick Smith will leave, that just kind of places that whole notion on hold. But I would hope that even in the consideration of the interim, that these very same points that we're making now about the characteristics, temperament, and talent of the next chief should also be skill sets, temperament, and talents of the person who would serve as interim, because that person could possibly elevate to the chief role. And I think that's critical. Councilwoman Robinson, when we talked about putting this together, you did make some efforts to engage some commissioners, and how was their response relative to being engaged in this activity or being open to, I know other than Mayor Lucas, I know you had some conversation. Can you shed some light on that for the
Yeah,
community?
absolutely. And I alluded to it a little bit earlier in talking to some of the commissioners. Again, hope there's over 108 people that's on this call. I'm hoping that they're among those, but just asking them to come and listen to what the community is saying. And they're definitely committed to making sure it's a transparent process, but felt like they needed to have more conversation amongst the Board of Police Commissioners first in designing what that process looks like before they start the community engagement. I respectfully disagree. I think that the community needs to be engaged at every turn. And as you're talking about putting out RFPs and things of that nature, you need to be connected with the community. There's such a disconnect with the public and the Board of Police Commissioners that this is a time and an opportunity for you to over communicate, for you to embrace the community, for you to embrace the public, and to be able to discredit a lot of the things that we've been saying to be true, is that they are out of touch and they don't represent the interest of the people, a lot of the people that they serve. And so this is an opportunity for them to step up and to do that. And again, we look to and are hopeful that this body of 106 people that are on this call will help to move that shift, because the mayor cannot do it alone. He does not have the always the votes to do it, but if we're behind him and all deciding to move in a certain direction, that can help to move and shift the narrative and the outcome.
Well, while we have the mayor here and that whole notion of like, you have one vote, 5 commissioners, you got to count to 3 to do anything. And so you've got one vote, and I won't go into any discussion of the current chair, Bishop Tolbert, because that's not always a vote that our community can count, unfortunately. But what I want to shift to is with regard to the city is now, it's February, you're getting ready to go into, you're into the budget cycle planning for the next budget, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so as you look to plan the next budget and having the lawsuit last year where the judge ruled that, the city council could not decrease the police department's budget last year, but certainly legally the council may choose to provide only the state mandated 25% funding to the police department in the new fiscal year. Is there, what is the pleasure or what is the thinking of the council going forward? Because I would think that here lies an opportunity as the police department begins to search for the new chief, that certainly any funding above the mandated level could be designated for just leverage to ensure that the police selection process is open, inclusive, transparent. A number of things can be leveraged when you're talking about the budget. So with you and Councilwoman Robinson here, I think we would love to know just your thoughts relative to how you plan to handle the budgeting process this year relative to the board of, to the police.
Well, I may start, and I'll note a few things. First, you summarized the lawsuit well. I think most people have not. The judge did not say that you can't allocate funding in the manner in which we did. The judge simply said it needed to be done during the regular budget cycle. As you point out, Ms. Grant, this is the regular budget cycle right now. And so this would be the time to have that level of discussion. We will release the budget this week, actually, which in many ways is a recommendation to council, among other things. And I think in that recommendation, you will see a budgetary alignment that reflects much of what you've discussed. Now, I imagine there will be debate about are the amounts in the right places and all of that, but in so many words, without playing all my cards yet, my view is that you will see that 20% versus extra breakdown, and you will see a discussion and a narrative about what it's going for, so that we are empowered because I heard, you know, the rally up north and all of that, that we were trying to do all these things. No, we're just trying to know where money is going. We're trying to know accountability. We're trying to be able to do our jobs. And I think that's the crux of all of it. And I believe you will see a reflection of that on Thursday when the budget's released.
Well, thank you
And
for
to the
that.
extent it's-
Yeah, I said thank you for that, and thanks for the correction. I said 25% is 20%
Yes, ma'am.
of the budget. Thank you for that. Follow-up question relative to the state legislature and Senator
Mhm.
Luetkemeier's legislation that would require the city to provide 25% of, I mean, why don't you just give an overview of that legislation? And then what is your strategy to address that?
Yeah, a few different things. So yeah, a state senator, like most of them who like to influence Kansas City policy, he does not live even in Kansas City, Missouri. And he introduced a proposal that would require us not only to spend now 25% of our budget, so that would be always roughly $270, $280 million a year, but he actually wrote it, I think in some way maliciously, to have it reflect 25% of our entire budget, meaning the aviation department, which is like 600 million, the water department, special sales taxes for firefighters and for capital improvements and everything under the sun. So actually altogether, that would mean that the budget would be increased for the police department up to $450 million. $450 million, the current budget's about 265. And so I believe that law to be just unconstitutional for really 100 different reasons, one of which is that it violates the Missouri Hancock Amendment. The state can't force us to spend more money without actually having a public vote statewide. And so they would need a public vote, and the state senators already admitted to that. So we'll see if that legislation goes. And so our answers are several. The first thing is that we do not, well, me as mayor will recommend that we just do not follow that law. That law is unconstitutional. The Board of Police Commissioners has shown a propensity to filing lawsuits against us, and they're welcome to do so again in such a case. But I think we would prevail if someone tried to claim that we have to spend $450 million on policing. I also appreciate the opportunity to talk about constitutional concerns I have with this very setup and system. I went down to Jefferson City. I think I'm making very cogent arguments. On the other side of testimony were the current chief of police, which is disappointing, but you know, hey, that's the world we live in. And Councilwoman Heather Hall from the Northland, also disappointing because it was opposed to the official position of the city of Kansas City. But you know, I think what we will do, and we've already appropriated funding for a legal dispute that might arise from it. But step one, we will make clear how it is unlawful. Step two, I think we either, if we need to declare it, we'll file a declaratory action of our legal view, or they will sue us. And we will make sure that we are not spending an extra $200 million that the police department hasn't even asked for on the budget. I mean, I'll make one other point on this because y'all didn't sign on to hear me ramble. I do visits, and Melissa Johnson is exceptional at her job. And we talk to people on in every part of kind of the criminal justice system. I talk to officers who don't know sometimes why, wait a second, wait, this money isn't coming to us in salaries. I'm like, no, it goes to a number of different things before that. And so that's why we will keep pushing, we will keep fighting, because I think you can take care of the people that work for the city and the department, but you can also take care of the city. You can address prevention. You can do a lot of that. And for years, I don't think we have hit that mark that we need to.
Okay, well, thank you for that update, I think, which is very important. I think those of you who are engaged and highly engaged, thank you so much. There's so much activity in the chat. I can't keep up. I need some help, folks. So if you see some questions that you think we need to amplify, please help the sister out, because there's a lot going on over here.
Gwen, can I just say something? Someone made a comment about Lincoln University and them training additional folks for careers in law enforcement. I think that's an excellent point to be made in terms of when we think about how KCPD is recruiting and looking for diversity. And so having an HBCU that is that locally that is trying to create a pipeline for African Americans to get involved in law enforcement, I think it's a key point to make. And so hopefully the next chief of police will look at that and take advantage of that opportunity as well. So I just wanted to make that.
You know, Damon, those type of systems are not foreign to KCPD. There was a time when KCPD did directly work with HBCUs to recruit and even had an open tryout or open interview, if you will, at Manual Tech to encourage more of that diversity. So that is definitely something that the department is familiar with and hope to re-implement once there is a change in leadership.
Yes, which certainly speaks to deeper issues within the department, where it's one thing to get a diverse pool into the system, into the academy, but then the system has to be designed to retain and support that pool, because what information that I've just recently gathered in doing more research on the police department and the impact that Rick Smith has had on diversity, on the racial culture within the department, is that folks come into the department, but they're washed out. And, you know, Black and brown officers and women, Black women. So, you know, it's one thing to do all this work, and that's great. I think that's great, the HBCU piece, but then we've got to have new leadership so that those people can thrive within the department. Did you see Councilwoman Robinson? Yes.
There's a couple of questions that I just want to make sure we're addressing. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but Jim Grandad Nunley wanted Melissa to address the prosecutor's relationship with the police chief more. And then Justin Horn is asking about the youth voice in the process. And so perhaps the mayor could respond to that.
Yes, the tense relationship between our current chief of police and Jean Peters Baker, our elected prosecutor in Jackson County, is not a secret to anyone. I don't believe so. And in any well-functioning city where crime is under control and there is a healthy criminal justice system, the prosecutor and the chief of police do have a good working relationship. We just recently went through a very public trial involving constitutional implications and violations from a KCPD officer. And those type of things could have been cured if Jean and Rick had a better relationship, where Jean could come across the street and say, hey, I've been seeing this issue in my cases. Let's do a training, a half-a-day training to make sure that we can readjust and cure those concerns. And so it is important. I know that it kind of seems like an intangible requirement, but a good working relationship between the chief of police and the prosecutor is imperative if we're going to really, you know, take the next step after an investigation is concluded to get a conviction to really have that deterring effect in our community.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I think
Yeah, I mean, look, it needs to be somewhere. We need to have a stronger relationship, I think, from all stakeholder parties. That said, people don't need to just give up on what they think either. I mean, there are real things that are issues. And I think one of the challenges with Kansas City broadly sometimes is people say you should just go along to get along. And instead of actually holding your deeply felt and held positions. I do think we have an opportunity to clear the air with a new chief position, that hopefully this is a person that would be able to engage with, I think, a lot of the communities that feel like they have not been engaged with at the same level, that will not send deputies to certain meetings in our community. I mean, frankly, and you know, that say it is what it is, but I'm on this Zoom right now and I got other things to do. All y'all got other things to do. Robinson does, everybody else. And I would hope in the future that even if, you know, somebody has disagreed with you the day before, you get back on and you are on their Zooms or in their community meetings and all of that. And we have not seen that exhibited in the way that it needs to be. Because for me, and you taught me this a while ago, Ms. Grant, it's not personal, right? You're fighting for your community. And I've disagreed with certain things that folks have said about me, but I keep talking to them. And the same way I've disagreed with things people in the North or in the business community everywhere have said. And right now, too often, it feels like you're either on the good list or the bad list for engagement with police department leadership. And that's not right. That's not the way things are supposed to be in this city. And so I'm looking forward to having a situation where somebody will walk into any room in the city, our leadership, and will say, I'm here to listen. During the middle of the protests, I did that with a whole bunch of people who did not have feelings for me that were positive on whatever sides they were. And I think that we should expect the same from the department, precisely because they get $250 million a year to make this city safer. And a key part of how you make this city safer are those conversations. So I think Prosecutor Peters Baker is ready for a stronger relationship. I know everybody at City Hall is, and we're looking forward to that from the police side too.
Okay, there's I don't know if there's a question or there's a comment over here. Is there a question in here? Winston Bowles, let's see, since 2017, unsolved murders continue to rise, hitting a record high of 182 in 2020, while in turn, KCPD saw fewer homicides than 73% of departments nationwide. Rick Smith also led the oversight and continued to keep the officers who killed unarmed Black men names such as Terrence Bridges, Donnie Sanders, and Malcolm Johnson on payroll. He as well contributed to the cover up of the officers. Winston is a young Black man of Southeast Kansas City. He wants someone who is willing to fight corruption within justice, equally preventing crime. So there's not a question in there, and but that is a statement. I thought there was a question in there, but that's just a statement. We want to make sure that the voices are heard. Someone said, "Why aren't we reading Winston's question?" That's, if there's a question from Winston that I missed,
There is one question from Winston Bowles.
Okay, thank you.
And if you want to look in the Q&A chat, there's some more condensed questions there. So that's where I've been pulling them from. But
there you
one
go.
of the things that Winston wanted to bring up is around the expectation of current officers to be more courageous around when corruption occurs. And so those expectations around, like, should officers be standing up and speaking about the corruption that they're seeing in the department?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Laura, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to mention the case of the 15-year-old at Go Chicken Go who was assaulted, because that young man there were, I believe it was in the teens, like 16, 18 officers on the scene watching two officers make that young man crawl across the parking lot. He was a passenger in a vehicle, crawl across the parking lot on his hands and knees. And then while he was down, his teeth were gnashed out. And one of the two arresting officers, the one who put his handcuffs on him, was not indicted. And he's actually the same officer who killed Terrence Bridges. It's my understanding from the attorney who represented both Terrence Bridges' family and the young man at Go Chicken Go. It's my understanding that only one officer told the truth out on the scene in the depositions, only one. And Chief Smith didn't know about that incident until the attorney carried the case to Gene Peters Baker's office. And so that's a serious breach, that you have nearly 20 officers on a scene, or any amount of officers on a scene, and they allowed their fellow officers to nearly kill a child. It was the same type of chokehold that killed George Floyd, y'all. And that little boy, a child, went to the hospital that day, and he was never arrested. So we need to talk about these things that are happening in our community. There were a lot of officers on the scene, and one gave it up.
Yeah. And that's, I think that's a problem that speaks to the leadership and the culture within the department. I mean, if officers are probably afraid to come forward for fear of retribution, not only from the chief, but from fellow officers, because they have to get out and fight crime, and they have to have backup. And you speak up about someone, a fellow officer who certainly, is using excessive force or in some way breaking the laws, you're at high risk of them not having your back when you're out there in the streets. And so it's really a very serious problem that must be addressed. And I think leadership at the top will help to change that culture.
Another question is about engaging the former chief, current, the former chief Forte in the search process and in the hiring process, engaging his thoughts.
If that's a question for me, I would be, yeah, I think that's important. I think Chief Forte showed an understanding of our community and at least engagement. Far from perfect, all of that, but that was a chief that you could talk to and that you saw it in a number of things. And so I think it would be important to get his perspective, both from his years of law enforcement in Kansas City, but more importantly, as a person in our community, as a Black man in our community. And so I look forward to talking to him about that as well.
And Ms. Grant, the last one that I see is, what do Black officers within the folds of KCPD
I see it.
want to see? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I see it now. Go ahead, finish.
Have they created a questionnaire for them? I hear Black officers tell me they joined to change things from the inside.
Well, we would be happy to create a questionnaire for Black officers and certainly an anonymous process for them to share their input, because frankly, it has been a challenge. We've made several attempts to get Black officers to come forward and share information while they're willing to talk or share, anonymously. In order to address the internal racism, bigotry, and microaggressions that they endure within the department, you got to put sunshine on that. And you can't put sunshine on something if you're not willing to come to the public in some kind of way to get that information out there. So we will definitely follow up with a questionnaire or survey opportunity for anonymous input from police officers about the change they want to see within the department, about the leadership that they want, or characteristics and temperament that they want in the next chief. We'll make a commitment right now to do that. Are there other questions that we've missed or comments? So it's 20.
I wanted to mention, Winston Bowles had mentioned the homicide rate. And, I, like many people who I'm sure are listening or here on this panel, I've lost multiple friends to homicide in Kansas City. And those of us who've had those type of experiences, we also really need to come out in droves. I know Damon works with this issue every single day in his job. It's really important for people to understand that how they've been treated during the homicide process, and that they give voice to that, if they've had good or bad experiences, that they talk about what worked for their family and what didn't, right? And I've had it firsthand where people are calling me desperate, saying the detective won't return my phone calls, and intervened in some kind of way. But I think we really need to hear from victims' families in this process, you guys. And I just wanted to lift that up.
There's another question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Daniels.
I just want to say I can't agree more, Laura. And there's something that's really bothering me. I just learned about this SB 666 bill, and 666 sounds horrible because it is horrible. When we talk about the homicide rate, I mean, this is a bill that's basically going to make murder. Oh gosh, it is a change of the stand your ground laws and making sure that people can, file for self-defense easier. And so I really want people to really look into that bill, SB 666, and call the person that's responsible for interest in that bill and tell them it's a bad idea. And then also reach out to your local legislator as well. Have your voice be heard on that. This is, when you talk about a solve rate in Kansas City specifically, this is going to make matters worse if the prosecutors have to come up with a reason or a motive for someone who's killed somebody. I mean, it's a horrible law, and it's going to make things a lot worse. And so just pay attention to that as well. I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. There is another question here. Is there anything community can do to support the request for DLJ intervention and investigation of KCPD? That's a great question. Thanks, Clint. We do need to have more community support for that. I mean, the DLJ has a lot going on nationally. And that I have followed up through the National Urban League, and our request for a DOJ investigation is still on the table. But I think it certainly would help if there was much more of a community outcry that we can advance to the DOJ to encourage them to take a closer look in KCMO. I know that Rock Nation has been, very public in making the request for KCK, and I think a more of a collaborative approach to that would be extremely valuable, Laura. And I know you working with them over there. I think because just if they come to KCK, they need to do both of these departments have a lot of issues, so they might as well, kill two birds with one stone. So we can probably follow up and try to connect KCMO to the KCK request and get that done. But community support and outcry would help to elevate that. There was a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's a question, a really interesting question about the next police chief. Should they be on record regarding local control of the police?
That's a good question. That's a good question. It might hurt them internally, or that it could be probably a little bit politically risque for them, but it's a question I would love for them to have to answer because because it'll speak volumes about to whom do they wish to be accountable. I think it's a very valid question to ask the new person. I would think most people coming from outside of this community they know of nothing else. We're the only city sitting up here in the country without local control. So they would expect that they would be working with the mayor and the city council rather than a board appointed by the governor. So where are we now? It's 25 minutes after the hour. Are there any other questions? I'd like to allow the panelists to have some closing comments. I see Councilwoman Robinson, there's something you must say. What is that?
Yes, I just want to make sure we spend some time on talking a little bit about the Police Accountability Task Force and how people can be supportive of that effort, and where do we go from here, and how do we make sure our voice is heard through this process?
So thank you for that. The Police Accountability Task Force we're still hanging in, and we've got a lot on our agenda for 2022. And one way that you help is to complete this survey today. Tiara, if you don't mind, could you repost the link so that people can see it here towards the end? Complete the survey and get that back into us. We will be collaborating with all of our partners, Ad Hoc Against Crime, More Square, the Jackson County Bar Association, everyone who supported this today, Councilwoman Robinson. Hopefully some of our other council members, maybe 5th District Council members, would want to collaborate, thanks to the Mayor's Office, so that we can continue to have these conversations and gain community input and publish the findings. When you get that survey back in, we're going to tally that up, and we're going to send it to the Board of Police Commissioners. We're going to put it on all of our social media sites. We're going to do a media alert. We're going to try to amplify the voices at every turn. So if you're interested in transforming public safety and rebuilding community trust, then reach out to the Urban League, and we will get you engaged in some way with the work of the Police Accountability Task Force. It is now 11:27. Those were the next steps. Thank you guys so much. Do any of you have any closing remarks you'd like to add as we wrap up this morning? Nobody? What?
I just want to say,
I should have known, the mayor. Okay.
No,
you got it, Robinson.
I just want to thank everybody for participating. I also want to thank the mayor for jumping in and sharing and being engaged in this process. And again, publicly to state that we do have your back as you continue to fight this fight and represent our interests. Thank you to the Urban League, Gwen Grant, and the Police Accountability Task Force, everyone on this panel. We really appreciate you. We know that this wasn't like the normal town hall forum, but you all engaged so richly. And we know that the Urban League is going to be harvesting all of the comments in the chat, the questions, the survey responses to make sure again that we have that same movement and action forward. So thank you all.
Thank you for that, Mayor.
Yeah, all I'm going to say is thank you for your engagement. I know we will disagree a lot, but this is actually what public discussion is about, that we have these conversations. And my goal is that we get the Board of Police Commissioners on that same page. We don't have to agree. We do need to make sure we're listening to everybody. And so that's all I got, and I look forward to engaging further.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you to all of the panelists. You were outstanding, and I sincerely appreciate it. And wow, the audience, thank you so much for your highly engaged activity. And we will make note of everybody's points in the chat. I want to leave with by extending an invitation on behalf of this group and the Police Accountability Task Force to the entire Board of Police Commissioners. We would love to invite the board to engage in community dialogue in this same format. And we will send a formal invitation. And Mayor Lucas, we hope that you will be the advocate for this invitation and encourage your colleagues to respond in a positive manner. And we know that if 5 of them gather, it's a quorum and they have to publicly notice, and we're fine with that because this is a public meeting. So we look forward to hopefully maybe the next gathering, we could engage the full Board of Police Commissioners, or at least 3 people, takes 3 to make a vote there. So we can get 3 of you guys at the table, you or 3 of the gentlemen, or Kathy Dean and 2 of the other guys, whatever. 3 people, Board of Police Commissioners, meet with the community. That's the next invitation. We'll get it out. Thanks everyone for attending. We look forward to the next one. Have a great Saturday.